to this week's Hope Springs Eternal. I am here with my friend Katie.
And I'm here with my friend Ricky.
And we are sponsored by Twizzlers this week. So we are glad that you have joined us. Never mind the Twizzlers part. So we've been talking about discipleship. And you know, we were wanting, I think, today to talk about what it's meant in our own lives and then how we're trying to live that out. But I guess a good place for us to start is talking about exactly what we mean when we say discipleship. For me,
Sorry.
it's okay. It's the bell that says it's time to talk about discipleship.
That was the bell to remember to pick up my child from school, which is just the stage of life that I'm in, that I have to remember to, be a parent at the end.
Well,
but don't worry, my mom is picking up my child from school.
Well, we're glad of that. But that's a great point because discipleship looks at different in different stages of our lives, and yet at the center of it, I think, is for me at least, it's just as simple to follow Jesus and how what he taught, what he said, how he responded to people. Really how he lived his life, and for almost like a mentorship about that, I guess, that's what rabbi means and disciple, that we are living out what we see and what we hear. I don't know, that's not too technical, but for me, that's what discipleship is all about. How about you, Katie?
Yeah, when I think of, defining discipleship, I just think of, what Jesus says when he says to sum up all of the law and the prophets is, these two commands, to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. And so, it's just kind of that catchy phrase that you've seen on shirts and bumper stickers and everything else, but it is so simple to remind yourself, that what we're called to do is to love God and to love people. And so, and as simple as that is, it's no less challenging.
Yeah.
That we spend our whole lives aiming for those two things and striving after getting those two things right, which, none of us will, but it's a good goal. So I think if I were to define discipleship, that's what I would say my definition is, stolen from Jesus, hopefully.
Good place to steal it from.
Yeah.
I also think, just like your watch, part of that is those things that remind us over and over again that that's the life that we live. I think it'd be a cool thing if my watch went off or phone went off and said, "Hey, Ricky, in this moment, live as a disciple of Jesus Christ." Because I know lots of times I'll start the day with that in mind, and it's easy to lay that aside or get hurry or something else just to take me down a different path. So maybe that learning how to remind yourself is, at least for me, is part of that as well.
Yeah, I think there's a certain thing as we learn to become something that I've sort of talked about this at times, that a lot of us live for kind of those like mountaintop moments, but discipleship there's not a lot of that. It's a lot of the mundane, and it becomes, muscle memory, that after a life of all of those daily reminders, all of those daily habits, that we become who we essentially are in the habit of being. The gap between who we want to become and who we've been acting like sort of starts to shrink, and we look back and we realize that essentially we are disciples. We start out seeking to become disciples, and then over time we discover that we are them, and it's through these small everyday habits of loving God, loving people, following after the rabbi, and it's not very glamorous,
Yeah.
but I think to remind ourselves, we are people, that we need these things in our lives to stay. Jay talked about the vine and the branches yesterday. Like, we have to stay connected to that life source. There probably comes a time in all of our lives where we think we can do it on our own, and then that usually doesn't turn out very well for us.
At least not for me, that's for sure.
Right.
I always like the idea too that we're always beginners. I mean, it may be that we are truly beginners, or that we are beginning into a new depth, or a new understanding of discipleship, or a new living it out of discipleship. And for the same point, I mean, that's just always a good reminder for me, because, once I think I've got it all together, those are the places when I really mess up. And so beginning anew is always a good thing for me. And there was a point where we did begin, and both of us have our own stories about those things that formed us and made us into the people that we are today. If you were to talk about, the things or the people that have really developed you into the follower of Jesus that you are today, who would you say, or what would you talk about, Katie?
Yeah. My discipleship journey started, I guess, as a teenager, or early, maybe tweenager is maybe what they call it nowadays. But I really just fell in love with the Bible and started going to youth group and saw people living out. I don't think I would have ever used the word discipleship at the time, but they were in leadership positions, youth-led leadership positions, leading games, leading devotionals, leading meal times even. And I went on a retreat and saw that, and I went to my youth director at the time and asked her, how do I get to do that? And she, with no credentials, no nothing, no resume, no anything, she just said, well, you join the leadership team. And she took me under her wing, and she gave me a lot of opportunities to lead, and a lot of opportunities to safely fail, to safely make mistakes. And so I began writing just my prayers and devotional type things, and was really encouraged in that. And so she was just somebody who just saw gifts in people and encouraged them. And so, we talk about following in the footsteps and in the dust of your rabbi. She was somebody who I followed closely. I got close to her. And another pastor who was an associate pastor at my church, my home church growing up, named Robert. He baptized me when I was confirmed, and he led me in Disciple 1 Bible studies and Disciple 2 Bible studies and Jesus in the Gospel Bible studies. And Robert was, he would say, the chief of all sinners. He knew the ways that he had fallen short, and so he knew the grace of God, and he talked about it readily, and you could see that grace lived out in everything he did, and just the way he lived his life. He was always for the underdog. He was always for the person that was left out or unnoticed or things like that. He cried every time he talked about the crucifixion story. He loved Jesus. He loved Jesus, and he loved me really well. And so he he was another one who, just became like a spiritual father in my life. And so we were also very close. And he taught me a lot about the scriptures and discipleship through that course. But, just people that invested in me, who gave me books to read, who had the courage to tell me when I was being prideful or arrogant or getting things wrong. My dad was not a Christian, but I would say that my dad shaped my discipleship. He taught me to be a leader. He taught me to care for other people more than I cared for myself. He always taught me to look out for other people, to kind of observe the situation and to see what needed help and what could be done. And my mom's faithfulness. My mom is the most faithful, steadfast person I know. Just through thick and thin is committed and faithful. And it's not this loud, get on stage and spotlight kind of faithfulness. It's that steady faithfulness that is going to last. And so all of these people, through simply living their lives in love with God and in love with people, really shaped me, and or introducing me to other saints who gave me prayers and words and examples to follow. What about you?
I think the same sort of journey. I can't remember a time when I didn't go to church, but I also remember my mom's wisdom. She wasn't a particularly religious person. She took us, but I remember that, like in a time of racism when I was growing up in Tyler, she would sit my sister and I down, and she would say to us this one little simple phrase. She would say, God's circle of love is pretty wide. And so that always made me stop and think about the ways that I responded to and dealt with people, especially in time when questions of color were a big thing. I'll never forget, God's circle of love is pretty wide. And my dad, he was one of those people that showed his love by hard work and taking care of us. I never heard him talk about faith till much later in his life. But he was one of those people that showed you that life was about showing up. And he would show up for our stuff, and he would take off work just so he could be at our flag football game or something like that. And I guess that of all the things that really, he could fix anything, but he just really impressed me about how he always made a point to show up for us. And I think faith in life and discipleship is about showing up for people. I'm like you. There were people, some of my youth directors, John and Jane Williams, meant the world to me. And they helped me to be a leader in my youth group. They fussed at me when I got arrogant, and that was good as well. And I've just been blessed. People at churches that I've served have just grown me. I'd stand up in pulpits and I'd look out and see people in their 70s and 80s, and, that knew the Bible up one side and down the other, and were just such people of faith. And I would think, man, what am I doing standing up here in front of these people? But oh my gosh, they loved me. They corrected me. My first church, there was a lady who was a retired She was a pastor's widow, and Lucille Ball. And sometimes she would call me up and she'd say, "Preacher, would you like to come over and have some cake?" And I always knew what that meant.
You were in trouble.
It wasn't so much that I was in trouble. It was that I had made a mistake or I could have handled something better. And she really made the effort to shape me and to help me. Just down through the years, just great people who have spoken and lived out faith in front of me. And I think later on in my life, it became real important for me to tend my soul.
Yeah.
And that wasn't always true. Maybe it was, and I just was doing it in different ways. But it became very important for me to have quiet time with God. Prayer, meditation, scripture reading. And as I've gotten older and older, that's become a bigger and bigger part. I still like listening. Now it's not so much the people who are my elders, though there is still some of that. I love listening to people who are at a different place in their faith journeys, because I think they have so much to teach me about life and faith. And I hope that I'm always listening and watching that. People will talk about different generations, and when I hear that kind of talk starting, I always want to go, "Oh, no, don't go there. Because let me tell you about so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and how God is doing this work in them."
Yeah.
And that's a good gift from me, Katie.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right that a lot of times when we talk about discipleship, we talk about go, 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 the action of, quote unquote, saving souls. That might not be a Methodist way of saying it, but I think that gets into us no matter what denomination we're part of. That we think somehow what we're supposed to be doing is telling people about Jesus. And I think there's a place for that, of course. But I think, Jesus showed us and his disciples that, there's just as much of a place for rest, for nourishing our souls, for listening, for eating, for laughing, for sleeping. And I think we miss out on a lot of that. We're like that Energizer bunny that just thinks that our worth is in how much we do for God or for the church. And, too much of a good thing becomes not so good. And I think there's a book called Letters to the Church that Francis Chan wrote. And one of the things he talked about was that he required his staff at his church to pray, for I think it was 1 hour every day. And, he said if people told me that they didn't have time to pray, I would graciously let them go. And I remember reading that and being really convicted by it, because it was like, I might not say that. I might not say I don't have time to pray, but I certainly act like it a lot. And I think we all do, if we're honest.
I think so.
And I don't think he was doing it in a way to make people feel guilty on his staff. I think what he was saying is, if you don't have time to pray, where are you going to get the spirit of love, the spirit of mercy, of grace, of vision? Where are you going to get the life that you need to live out this call. And this isn't just for church staff. This is for anyone who calls themselves to be a follower of Jesus. And I think I think especially in our economy, which is very much focused on how much we produce and how much we do and how many of our checklists we can check off in a day, I think just being with God, it's that Mary Martha story in the Bible, that we think we're supposed to be doing all of this stuff. And Jesus says, no, she's chosen the better thing of being with God, and that's just as much discipleship. And so I think that balance, finding that balance is really important, because, God, I think, is the best at sharpening us, at refining us,
yeah.
at tending to us, at healing us. I mean, there's times in our lives where we just need to be held, where God is trying to do a work in us and we just don't give him the time to do it. And so I think that is a part of discipleship. And yeah, I think that's a really important word of, it's not just everything you do, but there's a lot of internal work that none of us can put on a to-do list. It's just about presence and time and participation with the Spirit. Lots of people don't like that. And it's hard. I don't like it.
Hard.
I don't like it at times.
Because we are that economy in which we live. Our culture is so pressing in and moving faster or accomplishing more. And both of us like to read Thomas Merton.
Yeah.
And he was this master at saying, it is not about that, and it is something countercultural to that. But it is also, on the one hand, tending your soul.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, living in the world. I toy with the word believe a lot.
Yeah.
Because most of us use that as some sort of intellectual assent to Jesus, an affirmation, I believe in Jesus. But the real question is, just like you said, are we being in Jesus? Are we living as Jesus in our lives? And helping people to do that is a grander thing than people being able to make some intellectual or even just some emotional assent to Jesus, I think. And I think we both of us have used language like following in the dust of the rabbi. When he says to the disciples, come and follow me, they live with him. He sends them out to do the things that he's been doing. And when they don't get it right, he brings them back in and says, guys, and ladies, and sends them back out again. And I really think, I think there is a time when we talk to people about Jesus, but I almost think it's almost after they've watched us for a while and they come to us and say, tell me why you do the things you do or why you live the way you live. And you say, well, it's because I'm living as a follower of Jesus Christ. And I really believe that that's the best life possible.
Yeah.
For me, that's, the biggest part, if not the whole part, of discipleship. And I love talking theology with people. That's always lots of fun, especially when we start discussing it, having intellectual arguments about what this word or that word means. Like should Twizzlers be long or should they be short or I don't know. But I do think the biggest gift that I can give is to help people have the tools and to help people see a pattern. Even in those times when I have to say, don't do it like this, I really messed this up.
Yeah.
But to have a pattern that points people towards Jesus. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, Eugene Peterson wrote a book, and I don't know, I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but Contemplative Pastor or something like that. But he wrote, my greatest job as a pastor is to teach people how to pray. And Eugene Peterson, if you don't know who he is, he wrote the translation of The Message and dozens of other phenomenal books. He was an exceptional writer, an exceptional preacher, and yet he rejected a ton of notoriety and kind of celebrity Christian fame to be a pastor of a fairly small rural church. And he talked about, basically I end. And so connecting people to me to a certain extent ends. What I need to do, my greatest job as a pastor is to teach them to pray. And because this is sustaining, this is connecting people to life. And I think about discipleship like that. I've been on mission trips and other types of evangelism type things where we've gone door to door and we've handed people pamphlets and we've done these 3 steps to Jesus things or the cross thing or the 4-step Roman road thing, and then people say these couple of words and I don't even remember their names, and I guarantee you they don't remember my name, and we don't speak the same language, and we get back to the bus and we say, oh, we just saved 16 souls for Jesus Christ, and I'm like, looking back now, I'm like, did we do anything? I don't know. And I'm not trying to bash that. But I really think, if we had spent however many days that we went door to door, if we instead sat with the same person and built a relationship, or if we did that with our neighbors, or if we did that with the people in our own community, in our own homes, in our own households, and just were disciples to them, and not necessarily in an effort to save their soul, but just to share the love of Jesus, because it had such a impact, a transformation, a gift to our souls. I think people would like that, and so when we hear, this phrase discipleship, go and make disciples of all nations, we wonder what Jesus meant by that. And then, but for both of us, like what we're talking about is relationships. It was not a church strategy. We're preachers, and neither one of us mentioned sermons. I mean, I wonder about that often. My sermons mean nothing if I don't live out, hopefully, the love that I talk about when I go to the playground with my kids on Sunday afternoon. I think there's times that I hope it's surprising to people that I'm a Christian. I hope it's surprising to people that I'm a pastor. I hope it's surprising to people when they meet somebody in our church, in our country, in our community who calls themselves a follower of Jesus, because a lot of times what people have encountered is judgment, is hate, is condemnation, is whatever, is rejection. And so if what they experience through any of us, no matter who we are, what denomination, where we go to church, anything, is love, is welcome, is acceptance, is hope, is joy, is peace. And then they say, oh, wow, you're Jesus. How beautiful is that? I remember one time on a break, Michael and I were talking to my little brother and his wife, and they're not Christians, and she was talking about the church, and so we got on the topic of politics, and this was a long time ago, totally different candidates, and I said something about a candidate, and she said, wait, not all Christians are such and such political party? And Michael and I kind of looked at each other, and we were like, I don't think so. I said, I don't think all Christians are even American, so surely they can't all be this political party or that political party. And she was just like, I never knew Christians could be such and such political party. And it was like, I think we forget sometimes, living where we live, that there are people that don't know, that Christians can be all different, diverse and beautiful and loving and accepting and open, and that looks, that's not just Methodist, although I think Methodists are beautiful and wonderful, and I fully intend to live out my time as a Christian, as a United Methodist, but I've met wonderful everythings,
Sure. Absolutely.
And I think that that's such a beautiful thing when we do that, when we come together just under the banner of Christ.
I think, one of the things for me, when you're talking about that, the measure I have is not those titles, although I love being United Methodist as well. It's, are you real?
Yeah.
Can I see Jesus in you, in a real person? Can I see a person that is, free to admit they have ups and downs and flaws, and but also a person, we were talking about David on Sunday, a person who has a heart after God. And
Yeah.
I mean, you've been around those people, and you just know it, and you say to yourself, I want to be like them when I grow up.
Yeah.
Just because, some of the best pastors I've ever heard were the worst speakers I've ever heard.
Absolutely.
But man, you could feel the presence of God, and you could feel their heart for God, and you didn't have to ask questions. You just knew. And I think for me, that's the way I want to live my life.
Yeah.
That's what I want people to see and to experience in me. And then when you come to me and say, well, tell me about what Jesus means to you, I am so excited to do that with you. But I'm even more excited to see people's passions awaken, and for all of us to live as followers of Jesus.
Yeah. I always just think, the measure is not going to be, does the church think I'm a disciple, or, does the church think I love Jesus? But does my kids, kids think I love Jesus? Do my dogs think I love Jesus? Does my husband think I love Jesus? And not like, do they know it, by the way I treat them? The people closest to me, does my mom know I love Jesus? Do my brothers? Does my neighbor who doesn't love Jesus and has the yappy dog, does she know that I love Jesus? And know who Jesus is more because of me.
Yeah. 100% agree. this is going to be my last word on this. I'm sitting here thinking about a guy named James Lewis Hill. He was an oil field worker in the first church that I served, and his mama was in church every time the doors opened. But James Lewis didn't go. But I'd go over there, at first I'd go over there to see his mom. But pretty soon I started spending time with James Lewis. And it was always funny because James Lewis would pop a top on a beer and he'd go, "Preacher, do you want a beer?" And his mother would hear it that was on their back porch, and his mother would hear it, and she'd like to have a fit that he'd offered the preacher a beer. James Lewis would, every now and then I'd say, "James Lewis, why don't you come to church?" He was always gracious about that. And he'd go, "Oh, preacher, I don't know. I just don't know that that's right for me." But the cool thing was, every day that James Lewis was not out servicing wells, he was going through that little town, fixing things for widows, changing light bulbs, making repairs for them, taking them to go get groceries. When there were people that needed help, he was one of the first ones that would show up, and he made the best barbecue in the world. And in fact, he cooked it for Trisha and I's rehearsal dinner, and it was so good everybody ate it up before Trisha and I got any. And my former friends, they are. But when I think about a disciple of Jesus Christ, I would have loved for him to have been in church. But I love the community that he created and that he lived in, because it was really a community that glorified God.
Yeah.
And he will always be one of those people when I think about the word disciple.
Yeah.
James Lewis Hill.
Yeah. And I just think so much, we have this image of coming to church, and there are beautiful saints and disciples that come to church, and they're at church all the time. And that's great. And I celebrate that. But at the start of the gospel, Jesus says, come, follow me, come. But at the end of the gospel, he's going, go. And, I think there's something about that church, because of the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, my mom used to say this to me every day before I left for school. She would say, "Vaya con Dios, go with God." And I don't know why she said it in Spanish. Beats me. So when the girls started going to school, I started saying that to them. So I started dropping Lily off at school every morning. "Vaya con Dios, go with God." And then now I've started to say, "Hey, Lily." And she'll go, "What?" And I'll say, "God is in you, and God is all around you. Go with God." She'll go, "Okay, Mom." Wow. And then she tries to say it back. Vaya con Dios, I don't know why we say it in Spanish. Rosie says, "Don't say it in Spanish." And I said, "Okay." But I think that's, God is in us, and we go with God. And so we do, and we bring him, to everywhere. And God is everywhere. And so we become the church everywhere when we are intentional about it, about loving and serving and hoping and rejoicing and all of these things. There's this book called Every Moment Holy, and it's all about just recapturing these ordinary moments. And I have this thing by our coffee pot at our house that's just this like prayer over your morning cup of coffee. And it's so simple, but it's just about coffee and making it holy. And I think that's right. Like that's what we can all do. We can all go do that. And yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So I think it's about time
Yep.
for you to turn to these good people and tell them what your mama used to say or says.
Oh, I'm not even Spanish though. Vaya con Dios.
Vaya con Dios.
Go with God.
We'll
God is
see
in
you
you.
next time.